200 German soldiers, American food in front of them, and every single one refused to touch it. Not because it was bad, because they thought they were too good for it. What happened next is something Patton never put in his diary. April 1945. The war in Europe was dying. German cities were rubble. Supply lines had collapsed. Civilians were eating whatever they could find in the streets of Munich, Frankfurt, Berlin. And yet inside a POW camp outside Munich, 200 German prisoners sat in front of full meal trays and didn't take a single bite. This wasn't a food quality complaint. This wasn't a hygiene issue. These men believed American military rations were simply beneath them. They were soldiers of the Wehrmacht's 116th Panzer Division, and they had standards. Stay with me here, because what unfolds over the next 72 hours reveals something about human psychology, military pride, and leadership that history books almost never talk about. The 116th Panzer Division wasn't just any unit. By 1945, they were a battered force, but they carried a tradition of elite armored warfare that went back through France, the Eastern Front, and the Normandy campaign. These men had fought hard. Many had survived campaigns that destroyed entire armies around them. That history matters. It shaped how they saw themselves, even in captivity. And that's the question that drives this whole story. When everything is stripped away, rank, weapons, national victory, what does a soldier have left? For these men, the answer was identity. And they would starve before they let that go. The camp's mess sergeant, Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien, had been running POW kitchen operations for 6 months. He'd seen grateful prisoners, broken prisoners, prisoners who wept at the sight of real bread. What he hadn't seen was this: standard American military rations. White bread, vegetable soup with meat, canned beef, coffee. In April 1945, that meal was better nutrition than most German civilians had seen in months. And 200 men sat there, arms crossed, trays untouched. O'Brien walked the line trying to understand. One prisoner, a corporal who spoke English, gave him the answer directly. The food wasn't spoiled, he said. It wasn't cooked wrong. It was simply not acceptable for soldiers of the Wehrmacht. O'Brien reported it up the chain. It reached Lieutenant James Parker, the camp's executive officer. Parker went to the mess hall himself, looked at the waste, and tried reasoning with them. He explained the Geneva Convention. He reminded them they were prisoners. He asked them to be practical. The corporal, later identified in camp records as Ernst Wibber, was unmoved. They were not making demands, Wibber said calmly. They were simply choosing not to eat food that didn't meet their standards. That sentence, right there, that's the one that matters. Because it reveals something subtle and dangerous about pride. It doesn't feel like stubbornness from the inside. It feels like dignity. Parker walked out, went straight to Camp Commander Colonel Robert Hayes. Colonel Hayes was a career officer. Philadelphia, 41 years old. He'd seen enough of war to have very little patience for theater. He walked to the mess hall, heard Webber out personally, then made a decision that was either brilliant or brutal depending on how you look at it. Fine, no food. If American rations were beneath them, if this was their genuine position, he would respect it. He wouldn't force-feed anyone. He would simply stop offering. Hayes notified his staff. One sentence of guidance: no rations for the 116th Panzer Unit until they accept what is served. Then, he wrote it up and sent it up the chain. By the next morning, the report sat on Patton's desk at 3rd Army headquarters. Before we go further, if you found this channel through this video, you're in the right place. WW2 Forgotten Frontline is where we dig into the verified, documented moments of the Second World War that mainstream history skips. Hit subscribe. New stories drop regularly, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now Patton. He read the report over breakfast. His aide described his expression as hardening with each paragraph. When he finished, he didn't call a meeting, didn't draft a memo. He picked up a pen and wrote directly on the document. Maintain current status. No food until they accept what is offered. I will visit the camp personally in 72 hours. His aide raised the Geneva Convention question carefully. Patton's response was precise. The convention required them to provide food. They were providing it. The prisoners were refusing it. That was their choice, not a violation. The order went out. Day 1 was manageable. German soldiers knew hunger from the field. A missed meal was nothing. The barracks had some energy conversations, even some singing. Wibber addressed the group that evening. They were being tested, he told them. German discipline would hold. Day 2 changed the atmosphere. The mess hall was adjacent to their barracks. The smell of food being cooked for other prisoners, for American guards, drifted through constantly. Some of the younger men stood at windows watching. Stomachs were speaking louder than pride. One young private approached Weber that second night. He argued quietly, "It's just food. It doesn't mean anything." Weber shut it down. "We are not animals," he said. "We are soldiers. Act like it." The private went back to his bunk. His stomach hurt. Day 3, they woke up weak. Standing without support was difficult for some. The smell from the mess hall had become something closer to torment. The group that had been singing on day 1 was now sitting in silence. And then a jeep pulled up to the camp gate. Colonel Hayes met him at the entrance. 3 full days, sir, still refusing. Patton asked how they were. Weak, hungry, still holding. Patton said, "Take me to them." He walked into the barracks. 200 prisoners on bunks and standing by walls. All of them thin, all of them depleted. When they saw the 4 stars on his collar, they stood to attention. Even on 3 days without food, discipline was in the muscle memory. Patton stood at the center of the room and spoke plainly. He told them he'd been fighting their army for 3 years across North Africa, Sicily, France, and Germany. He told them he respected what he saw: discipline, toughness, soldiers who stood by each other even when it was costing them. Then he told them the truth about where that discipline had brought them. You lost. The war is ending. Your country is in ruins. Your people are starving in the streets of cities. You're sitting here refusing to eat better food than any of them have seen in months. He let that land. Then he said something that cut through everything Weber had been telling his men for 3 days. Pride is worthless when you're dead. Discipline without sense is just stupidity. And right now, you are being stupid. The room was silent. Weber stepped forward. "One question. If we eat, do we have your respect as soldiers?" Patton looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "You have my respect because you stood by your men for 3 days even when it was the wrong call. That takes something, but respect doesn't fill your stomach. Make the smart choice." Weber nodded slowly. "We will eat." Within the hour, the mess hall was full. The same bread, same soup, same coffee they had refused for 72 hours. Some men ate slowly, deliberately. Some couldn't pace themselves. Some had tears running down their faces while they ate. Weber sat with his men and said nothing. Sergeant O'Brien watched from the doorway. Lieutenant Parker stood nearby. One of them said it took 3 days, and one speech to break them. The other said, Patton didn't break them. He gave them permission to let go. That distinction is worth sitting with. Because Weber wasn't stupid. None of them were. They knew the food was fine. They knew the war was over. What they didn't have until Patton walked in was a way to step down from the position they'd publicly committed to without feeling like they'd surrendered something permanent. Patton gave them that. He acknowledged the discipline it took to hold the position. Then, he reframed the smart choice as its own kind of strength. That's not breaking someone. That's understanding how pride actually works. The 116th Panzer Unit never refused food again. They ate what was served, completed their time in the camp, and most returned to Germany after the war ended. The young private, Klaus, spoke about this episode years later. He said they thought refusing made them strong. What Patton showed them, not by force, but by honesty, was that real strength is knowing when pride has stopped serving you and started consuming you. Patton never mentioned this incident publicly. No diary entry. No speech. For him it was straightforward. Stupid pride gets people killed. His job was keeping people alive. Done. Here's the layer that most tellings miss. This wasn't a story about arrogance being defeated. It was a story about identity under extreme pressure. Those 200 men had lost everything that defined them: their army, their mission, their country's position in the world. What they had left was how they saw themselves. Soldiers. Disciplined. Above desperation. Refusing the food wasn't irrational. It was the last act of control available to them. And it worked, until it started killing them. Patton understood this. His response wasn't humiliation. It wasn't force. It was a mirror. He showed them what their pride actually looked like from the outside. And he offered them something to replace it. The identity of smart soldiers, making the right call under hard circumstances. That's leadership. Not domination. Reframing. In April 1945, 200 men chose hunger over what they saw as dishonor. They held for 3 days. Most of us will never face that kind of test, but smaller versions of it show up constantly in jobs, in relationships, in arguments we've already lost but can't bring ourselves to walk away from. The question Patton was really asking, in that barracks, wasn't about food. It was, what are you willing to let go of, once you realize it's only hurting you? If this story made you think, drop a comment below. And if you want more of these documented, verified WW2 stories that go deeper than the surface version, subscribe to WW2 Forgotten Frontline. Like the video, it genuinely helps this channel reach people who want real history, not recycled summaries. Next time, we're going into a story most people have never heard. Stay tuned.